There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel and another Friday Reads. This one is particularly jam-packed full of goodness and goodies and whatnot. So I have a giveaway draw to do in a couple minutes and all kinds of stuff. Personally, just really getting ready to move, getting more and more excited. The possession date is next Thursday. Move-in date is a couple of weeks after that, but so still lots to do. Pretty soon you're going to see some empty bookshelves or maybe some piles of boxes of books behind me, but I'm putting that off as long as I can. And I have had two fabulous biblio adventures, TM the Book Cougars. Last Friday I went to the launch for what I thought was going to be rather maybe dry or not so terribly interesting, and oh my god, it was anything but. It was a launch of the latest edition of Folklore magazine. It was a special issue devoted to pioneers in the queer community in Saskatoon, called Unapologetically Queer. And this has to be one of the most gorgeous put together magazines that's not a national magazine that I've ever seen. Really thick glossy paper, pictures, just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And the bookstore venue for the book launch was full. I've only seen it that full once before. So it was just an amazing turnout. And what it made me realize is I have paid a price by not staying in this community forever, because my story would have been older than any of the stories that were featured, or as old at least, but I've been gone. And so I didn't know a soul in this jam-packed audience full of queer folk. I didn't know anybody. The people that I know, that I knew in the 80s, they're mostly dead. And then I lived here for a couple more years in the early 90s, and I didn't see any of those people. And I haven't connected at all with the LGBTQ community. I think those days are done for me. It's time for the young'uns to take over. And of course, I gained a lot. I would have probably not been happy to stay here all those years. It would have been a little stifling at various points of my life. But the people that have lived here in the meantime have fabulously interesting stories, and they're all written up. My one criticism, and that's a function of the conservative views of people that live in a small Canadian city, that most of them didn't publish their last names. But lots of photos, and the stories were interesting, and the people that came up and spoke about their stories were just lovely. So that was incredible. And then last night, Mum, Sharon Batalla, and I went to the book launch for a couple of Saskatchewan short story collections. Most interesting to me was one by my friend David Carpenter, called Hello, New Short Fiction. And it was a very well-attended event as well. The other guy, I don't know him personally, but he is an old friend of David Carpenter's, and his name is Dwayne Brenna. I went to a launch of a book of theater-related essays by Dwayne Brenna. I might have mentioned on this channel, and he also writes short stories and other stuff. He is a retired drama professor here in town. And that was just an amazing evening. I really loved the short story length excerpt from a longer kind of novella in this book that Dave read. It was funny and really great. And I didn't care for the story that Dwayne Brenner read just because it was about a sentient parrot that thought and talked like a human being, and that kind of fiction is a crime against literature. But I have been assured that was the only story like that in the book, so I will give it a try someday. But we had a lovely time. Sharon Batalla and Mum and I dined beforehand, and it was a lovely evening. So those are my biblio adventures to report. So without further ado, there is a draw. The novel The Inheritance by a big friend of this channel, Cauvery Madhavan, that I read last year and loved. And Cauvery very generously is donating, not just donating, she's going to sign it and mail it to you with a special The Inheritance merch style bookmark. And she told us all about the book last week, and you had 6 days or something to enter your name. And so there was 19 entrants. And let's see who the winner is. And the winner is Audrey H. So congratulations, Audrey. That is great. I will put my email address in the show notes. I'll also put it as a reply to your comment once this video goes live. And you just have to email me your full name and mailing address, what inscription you'd like to you personally, or just Cauvery's name, or I love you, Audrey. Signed, Cauvery Madhavan. I'm sure she'd write just about anything you've told her to, and make sure that to get that. I would say also give your phone number because sometimes, depending on where you're mailing from and to, they demand a phone number. So if you don't mind giving that, I promise I won't sell it to anyone. All right? Congratulations. And thank you again, Cauvery, for such a generous offer. All right. Oh my God, what an incredible mystery guest this week. Let's check them out, shall we? And this week's mystery guest is the Japanese American translator, hailing from California and been living in Tokyo for years, Yuki Tejima. Yuki, welcome.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to finally be here, sitting here with you.
It's nice to put a face to a name and a voice because you and I appeared on a podcast. Was it about a year ago now?
You did, and
like that.
Yes.
The book club review podcast with Kate, and we talked about a Japanese novel. What was the title?
Mild Vertigo by
Mild.
Mieko Kanai.
That's right. Translated by
Polly Barton.
Thank you. Good.
Great.
You've passed the first test, Yuki. You had all the information in your head. That's how I met Yuki. And you also have an incredible Instagram presence, Bookstagram presence. Your handle there is Book Nerd Tokyo, and you talk about your translation work and about your reading, but also you are a habitué of Japanese bookstores.
That's how the account began when I first moved from the States to Tokyo about 10 years ago. I didn't know the city, and my way always to get to know a city is through the bookstores. And Tokyo just has so many. Their big box bookstores are wonderful, but they also have incredible independent bookstores. So I started just exploring the entire scene and sharing my finds on Instagram. And that's how the account started, actually. I wasn't a translator then.
Okay, I want to hear more about that story, that evolution. One of my first teaching jobs, I had so many in Tokyo when I was there from about, let's see, 2009 to 3 years ago, was near Jimbocho. So every lunch hour or afternoon break, I would go to Jimbocho. So I loved that area. That's the big bookstore area.
I could live there. I wish I did.
Absolutely. I have done some vlogs. I call them vlogs, but vlogs of walking through Jimbocho. So I'll put a link to those in the show notes. They're really old now, but it's quite interesting to wander around Jimbocho. 10 years ago, you moved to Tokyo. And why did you move to Tokyo?
I was living in New York before I moved to Tokyo, and that's where I met my now husband. And my partner, he's Japanese and he lived in Tokyo. And Tokyo is always, because I was born in Tokyo, but moved when I was 4, moved to Los Angeles. It never felt, Tokyo doesn't feel like home necessarily. It still feels, or at the time it felt foreign. I didn't really know it. My parents are both from Tokyo, so we would visit when my brothers and I were children. We visited for summer vacation, winter vacation, but I really wanted to, at this point in my life, move to Tokyo and really learn where I came from and what the city is about and what the country is about. And that's why it was just the perfect timing. And I love the city. Coming from New York to Tokyo was a smooth and relatively easy transition, and I love it.
That's all fascinating and mirrors in a small part my journey. But after living in New York and Tokyo, where would one go next? London, maybe?
Where they have good bookstores.
And then, so you weren't a translator. You became a translator after you moved to Tokyo. So give us the Reader's Digest version of that story, because I'm fascinated. How does one become a translator?
So I'd been a commercial translator, so working with clients, either in food, fashion. I've done every type of translation from real estate pamphlets to commercial subtitles to TV subtitles. I've worked in film and television, shampoo bottle labels, everything. So I've been working freelance for a while now. So I had been a translator doing all other types of translation, but as a book lover, literary translation was like the top. I wouldn't even consider it the end goal because it wasn't something that I thought that I was ever capable of getting into. I didn't think that I would be able to get into it. But when the pandemic happened and we were locked down, I was locked down in LA with my parents, my clients, as with the rest of the world, everything dried up, my work dried up, and I found the JLPP translation competition, which is the Japanese Literature Publishing Project. And it's an annual translation competition from Japanese into English and also into another language, but that language changes every year. It's put on by the Japanese government, and I found it online in my just lockdown and not having anything else to do. And I thought, if not now, when? Really, the world is locked down. I have no other work. This is something that I've always wanted to do, but was just terrified of trying. And I've never been educated in literary translation. I've never gone to a literary translation class. I don't have a degree. And it would all be just this is how I think it would sound in English, the dialogue. And so I entered the contest. It was the assigned text happened to be by Hiromi Ito and Seiko Tanabe, two legendary women writers in Japan who I have long admired and read. And I think if the assigned text had been maybe I might not have, again, I might have bowed out saying, no, there's no way that I could do it. But I felt that I could hear the voices of these writers in my mind. And so I tried it. I tried the contest and I ended up winning an award, and that kind of opened up doors. But I think I really needed to be pushed into a corner to take that big step.
That is fascinating. And as because we talked offline, that I have recently read The Thorn Puller by Hiromi
Right,
Ito, translated
right,
by Jeffrey Engels for my
right.
Patreon book club. And that was quite a wild ride. And so, how long was this piece that you had to translate?
I would say not very long. One was an essay, one was a short story, very short story, maybe 10 translated English pages, something like that each.
It wasn't a novel, but it
No,
wasn't
no, no.
one page. Yeah.
Right.
So random questions from my brain is feeding me right now. What is your favorite Japanese word?
Ooh. Oh, what? That is a very random but good question.
Of the day, favorite word of the day, or
Actually, there is a word, otsukaresama, that,
Atsuresama.
right?
Otsukare.
That people say at the end of a workday that has no English translation,
That's right.
no direct translation. So when it comes up in novels, which it does a lot, I have to change what the English translation would be depending on the context. Means it could mean good work
Good
today.
work today. Good
Yeah,
job.
good job. If you were
Well
doing a
done.
job together, then good job, well done. It could be just go home and rest, see
You
you
worked hard on
tomorrow.
this, or yeah.
Yeah, but it's such a warm word if someone says "Otsukare-sama," thank you for your hard work, and you say it back, "Otsukare-sama," and depending on who you're saying it to, if it's someone older, you say "Otsukare-sama deshita," or if it's like you just said, if it's someone that you're friendly with, yes, "Otsukare." So there's so many different versions, but that's a word that never gets old when people say it to me after a work day or after a big job or something like that. It always makes me feel warm inside. And I'm also thinking, oh, this would never translate in English.
That's
In,
wonderful. I think one of my favorite expressions is kochira koso. It's me who should say so. When somebody says something nice to me and I feel like I should be saying it back to them, kochira koso. And so I
I
use
love
that one
it.
a lot.
I
Yeah.
love that one too.
Yeah.
Yes, I love it. Yes.
And yeah, we could probably talk for an hour about all this stuff, both having lived in Tokyo and so on. And tell us a quick anecdote about a thorny translation puzzle you had to sort through,
Hmm.
translating from Japanese to English.
The biggest ones, I think, are the ones that any translator from Japanese probably have to think long and hard about. And it's about which Japanese words to leave as Japanese words in the novel. Because something that, for example, fusuma, which is a paper sliding door in old Japanese homes, but not necessarily old Japanese homes. You can rent a brand new condo, and if it has a tatami room, it will likely have this fusuma door. But do I say sliding paper door every single time it comes up? Or can I just say Husuma, explain that once? People use Husuma in everyday conversation here. It's not a special word. It's like just saying door. Can you open the door? Can you open the Husuma? So that was something that I ended up leaving as Husuma after explaining subtly the first time it came up. And also, people can search now, they can look anything up. And so I think we are encouraged to leave more untranslatable words in Japanese instead of trying to translate every single thing into what the English equivalent might be when there isn't one.
Yeah, I imagine that is a ever-present challenge, not challenge, but something you got to think about all the time for every page. And all of your hard work and your dream has come true, and now you have not one, but two translations of Japanese novels coming out in the next 10 minutes virtually, and then a bunch more later in the year. We're going to focus on the two that are coming out the soonest. And the first one I think you're going to tell us about is How to Hold Someone in Your Heart.
Actually, it's the first book
I get the wrong one.
in that series. It's called Lost Souls Meet Under a Full Moon. And the sequel is called How to Hold Someone in Your Heart. And that one is also coming, which I don't have yet. I don't have a physical copy, but that's also coming out this year. But this is by Mizuki Tsujimura, who is a massive author in Japan. Some of you may have read Lonely Castle in the Mirror. This would only be her second translated title into English, but she has at least 35 novels in Japan, many of which, maybe 10 or so, which have been turned into films, television.
The one that's forthcoming, it's the second one, and the first one was done by a different translator.
Oh, right. Second in her from her library. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, the first one.
Oh, are they a series?
No, they're
not a series. They're a standalone.
They're standalone. This is just her second translation in English.
Okay.
And Lonely Castle in the Mirror was her first translation.
I see. Okay.
The one that is coming out in April, Lost Souls, was actually published in Japan years before Lonely Castle in the Mirror.
So tell us about the book. What's it all about?
This is a wonderful story. I am not kidding if people were to ask me what my favorite Mizuki Tsujimura book is, and I have dozens on my shelf, and I really do love and have loved and admired her as a writer. But this book, which is called Tsunagu in Japanese, just simply Tsunagu, is definitely my favorite. So I cannot believe that I have had the luck and the honor of translating this book. So Tsunagu in Japanese means to connect or the connector. And in English, I translated Tsunagu as the go-between. So when you read the novel, you'll see the go-between come up a lot. And because Tsunagu was the title in Japanese, we were going to go with the go-between as just the simple English title, but there's already a book called The Go-Between.
Yeah, which I love.
And so the publisher decided to go with this different title, but you will still see the go-between throughout the book. So there's this boy who is in Lost Souls Meet Under a Full Moon. He's a high school boy named Ayumi, and he is being trained by his grandmother she has a special power, and he is being trained to take over for her. And what that power is when a living person who they call a client comes to the go-between with a request to see someone who has passed away, to have one final meeting with this person. And the go-between goes and negotiates with the deceased. And if the deceased says yes, then they, on the night of the full moon, in a certain location, it's a hotel in Shinagawa, and it has to be here. And that the reason why is you can read about that in the book, but it's explained in the book. They can meet for the entirety of the night, so the whole time the moon is out, from when the sun sets to when the sun comes up in the morning. They have the entire night to meet and to speak. And the deceased comes and visits in person, so they can reach out and touch the person and talk to the person and hug the person, and then they vanish. But the catch for both of them, the deceased and for the living, is that they're only allowed one meeting their entire lives. So if the living person, when they make this request, they will never for the rest of their lives be able to make another request. And if the deceased receives a request and they accept the request, then they would not be able to take any other requests that might come later on. So it becomes are they the people that they want to see the most? Or if this deceased person, for example, is waiting for somebody to request them.
Yeah,
And
so I can
somebody,
just imagine the psychological
exactly.
potential for people to get really deeply wounded by being rejected by their grandma because their grandma's waiting to talk to the other grandson or whatever.
But it's really the thing about Mizuki Tsujimura is I went to a talk recently that she gave, and she writes without knowing where her stories are going to go, where her characters are going to go. So she started out with writing these episodic stories of a young woman reaching out to an idol, a star that she idolized because the star saved her life in real life, and she wanted to thank her. So there's that episode, and then there's another episode with a son who's a grown man who wants to meet with his mother, who he didn't really communicate with when she was still alive. And so there are these episodes, and there are 3 or 4 episodes, but what's so interesting is that Mizuki Tsujimura said that as she was writing, Ayumi, who is the go-between himself, as she was writing, he started to struggle with why he was in the position to bring the dead and the living together. And isn't it just the ego of the living to want to meet with the dead and bring them back to life? And so he started, she said, the author, yes, he really started to struggle with it. So what I thought was just going to be episodes, I realized that I had to tell Ayumi's story. So the second half of the book becomes Ayumi continues to take on these cases, as they're called, but it's his struggle. It's him asking himself what is the purpose of death? And what if the living were allowed to could connect with the dead at any point in their lives, then what is the point of what is the difference between being alive and being dead? And starts to have all of these existential questions. And we learn about his past, and we learn about the past, his grandmother, and why he is in line to receive this power. And it gets rather dark. So it's not a YA by any means, though young people can
That's
really read it. It's definitely
that's very comforting for me because I don't like YA, but it sounds you're really selling it to me. This is wonderful. Are you familiar with, she's a Asian Canadian writer, but she lives in the States in Seattle, Kim Fu.
No, I don't think I've ever read her work.
I don't know what all she's had published, but her short story collection from a few years ago, Lesser Known Monsters of the 21st Century.
Mm.
The first story is about a very similar thing set speculatively in the future, and it's fascinating. I think you would enjoy it now, having translated this book.
Mm.
I didn't like any other stories, so I didn't finish the book, but that story, yeah, was amazing.
Wow.
So
Wow. Thank you for that.
if I can't find the title of the story, because I don't think it's the title story, I'll
Mm.
put it in textually below. But yeah, the more you were telling me about this, I thought, oh, that really resonates.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, the author,
Mhm.
is she still with us?
Yes, she's early 40s, I think.
Okay.
Very,
And so
very
did
much with
you
us, very
have
prolific.
contact with her?
I haven't,
Uh-huh.
and she's such a huge name here. I would be completely intimidated because I've read her work and know her work well. I didn't have any questions for her as I was translating. There were no, I just felt Ayumi speaking. In my mind, he spoke like an American teenage boy. And he was going through these cases and meeting these people and really maturing and growing up. And to me, he sounded American, so that's what I put on the page. But no, hopefully it would be wonderful to one day meet the author, but I have not yet.
And remind us if you didn't say, I can't remember if you said, when is the pub date?
So this is coming out April 3rd.
Oh, very soon.
Very
That's
soon.
great. And you have also translated another book by the same author that's coming out quite a bit later this year.
So that one is called How to Hold Someone in Your Heart, and that's coming out later this year. The date is not set yet, but this is, if you fall in love with Ayumi in the first book, you'll want to know what happens to him. So the second book is him 7 years later. He's now in his 20s. He's no longer in school. He's graduated, and his grandmother has passed away, which is not a spoiler because that's how he becomes the go-between. So the second book is just as moving. It's similar. He meets different people and manages different cases, but he also has his personal story, and he meets somebody and growing up that he has to do. So that's also, I was actually very moved translating that one as well.
Wonderful. So those two are a series. And is there more books in that series?
So the author said, she didn't say not to say it. She said that she's working on a third, but that's not even out in Japan yet. But I was just thrilled as a reader, as a fan, just to hear that. And she said that's going to be Ayumi later in his life. So she's really taking Ayumi from boyhood, from teenager to, I don't know how old he's going to be in the third book. But as a reader, I'm just excited to be able to read it and to see where Ayumi goes.
That's wonderful. Is there something intrinsic to Japanese culture about this kind of topic, communication with loved ones beyond the grave, that you've learned about or that you know about that you could tell us that would contextualize these novels?
I don't know that there's something. I know that every year Obon, the Obon Festival in August
Right.
is a big event for the Japanese, and in August they celebrate the return of spirits, dead spirits, and the family gets together like they do for New Year's, and they have feasts and they talk and they gather. So in that way, and that's one of the few major kind of Thanksgiving like family get-togethers where the kids come home and everyone gets together. Sorry, that's American Thanksgiving that I was talking about. So maybe people don't think and talk to the dead necessarily every
Not
day,
that I ever remembered hearing. So this
but
came out of Mizuki Tsujima's fabulous brain more than it
her
came out of.
brain is so fabulous. There is just so much in her brain that, I mean, she writes a novel every year and every book is incredible. It's not just, oh, she's a one-hit wonder, or yeah, this one is good, but the rest not so much. You can't choose her most popular title or her best-selling title because she keeps outdoing herself. But Tsunagu, this book was definitely one of the earlier ones in her career that put her on the map.
And now we're moving to the other one that's coming out shortly by a different author. Tell us about that one.
Sure, this one is called Someone to Watch Over You, and this is by an author, Kumi Kimura. And this is coming out with Pushkin Press, also in April. And this one is a completely different story, different in tone, different in character. Lost Souls Meet Under a Full Moon it's very dramatic and emotional, and there are a lot of characters and there's a lot of dialogue and it's very lively. This one, Someone to Watch Over You, is about two people in a house who live together but do not communicate with one another.
And am I right in remembering it's set in COVID, early COVID
Yes,
era?
yes, it's set during the pandemic, but it's not, I wouldn't necessarily call it a pandemic novel because the two that live in the house together, who are strangers, they do not know each other or did not know each other until they found themselves living in this house together. They would have lived this way, maybe not in the house together, but they're troubled. They each have issues in their own lives. So I think they go about the world a certain kind of way, and I think they would have regardless of the pandemic. So it's two protagonists. The woman is a 45-year-old woman who lived in Tokyo for a while, but she's from Iwate Prefecture. That's where this book is set, and that's in the Tohoku region where the 2011 earthquake and tsunami happened. And the effects of that, although much of the Tohoku region is now looks very much it might have before the disaster, the Tohoku people and people who live in that region are so deeply affected by it that it's not something that goes away. It's not something that they recover from. So when you think of the pandemic and the atmosphere, the gloom around the pandemic, with the kind of the gloom and the heavy atmosphere of the earthquake and tsunami, though in the novel it's 2020 now, so it's years after. You have both of those, and you have a house, and this 45-year-old woman who is from that's the house she grew up in, but her parents have passed away. So she's living in this house alone. She was a former elementary school teacher, and one of her students, fourth graders, drowned in the sea, and the father of the boy blames her as the teacher for turning a blind eye to the bullying that was happening in the classroom. She may not be directly responsible for his death, but she carries this guilt inside of her. So that's Tae, this woman. And the man is the handyman who comes to her house to fix her drain. He's early 30s, and he's also from Iwate, but like her, he lived in Tokyo and worked in Tokyo for a while, but now he's back living in his brother's shed in the backyard, essentially. He doesn't have a place to live, really. So his story is that when he worked in as a security guard in a security company based in Tokyo, they shipped him off to Okinawa, where they have protests surrounding an ongoing thing with the building of new military bases, US military bases, and things like that. So a security guard was sent to go to watch over the protesters. And there he got into a tussle with one of the protesters, a female protester, didn't mean to, but knocked her to the ground and she fell. And then a couple months later, he heard either on the news or online that this woman had passed away. So he doesn't know if he caused that, but they're both, the father is accusing her of killing his child, and here online, everyone is accusing the security guard of killing this woman. So both of these people have these heavy hearts from possibly having killed someone, but not being directly responsible. But the handyman comes to this woman's house, fixes her drain, and a different day she gets her wall spray painted. Get out of here.
Hey, Editing Sean here. Just so that it's clear from the outset, when Yuki says that she gets her wall spray painted, the exterior wall, that means somebody spray painted that message on her wall. Vandalism. I think it was clear in context, but maybe I'm the only one that was momentarily confused, so I'm saving you any such confusion. Let's carry on, shall we?
But we don't know if that's because Iwate is the last prefecture in Japan. So basically the last state to have a COVID infection. So they were in the clear for the longest time. And so if you were infected in Iwate, that was basically you were going to be shunned by the entire town, entire city. Because I think so get out of here could just mean you're from Tokyo and you're back now. Get out of here physically, or it could be she thinks that it's the father coming to torch her house, and she's very paranoid. They're both very paranoid people. And when the handyman comes to fix her drain, after a couple of visits, she asks him to come and wash the spray paint off. And she realizes that he doesn't have a place to live. He's living in a shed. So she says, I have an extra room. Do you want to sleep there for a couple of nights until you find, but she's not friendly by any means. And they end up, they're living together, but she has rules. No seeing each other, no talking to each other, no being in the same space, no sharing of anything. So they're literally living existing in the same house. She's upstairs, he's downstairs, but they only communicate through written notes. And it's a very strange novel. It's meant to be. It's about two isolated people who, when they live in a house together, are they still isolated? Are they still completely alone, or are they no longer alone? The title's Someone to Watch Over You. Are they watching over each other? But they haven't seen each other in months. They end up living together for months without seeing each other once. It's very dark and unsettling.
God, I just, it sounds amazing. And it's a very glib comment, but it sounds like Hikikomori roommates.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's a miracle that they met, that two
Right.
hikikomori type people who basically do not communicate with anybody else in society somehow found each other and were desperate enough, both of them, to say, okay, let's just live in this house together because COVID is raging on outside. Yes.
And hikikomori, for people that don't know, is the Japanese word for people that, and it really is a essentially Japanese phenomenon. I've never heard of something quite exactly like that in the West, but people that are just completely that recluse, right? It's a recluse,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who are hermit type people, and it's more prevalent, I would say, in Japan. Wouldn't you?
I
Than
would say that
any other country.
it is a major social issue. It can start out with a child who doesn't want to go to school, but from there it could continue until they're in their 20s and they don't leave their house and their rooms, and their parents bring their food up to their rooms. And yeah, and it seems to be something that, I don't know, it's like you're not supposed to yank them out and bring them out of the room and make them go outside. It's a very sensitive topic.
And for that kind of a personality or that kind of a context, to set it in COVID just makes all kinds of sense and would just heighten all of that. So Wow. Oh my God. So I don't know anything about Kumi Kimura. Tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about her.
This is her first English translation, but she has been writing for 19 years in Japan. So she is very much an established writer here, and she has several novels. She is very literary versus Tsujimura, who is mystery and kind of fantasy and really, I suppose, genre, but that's just for this book because Tsujimura spans various genres depending on her novel, versus Kimura, who is very literary, not plot driven. Tsujimura is very plot driven. Kimura is not plot driven, and that is the point. So this novel takes place, you're in Tae's head, the woman protagonist's head for a chapter, and then you're in the Shinobu, the guy's head for a while, and then it changes back and forth. So you see the story from both perspectives. And throughout the entire novel, he calls her onna, woman. She calls him otoko, man. They never say each other's names. So they're completely different. But she's very literary. She's been writing for a long time, and she was very excited to have her first book and surprised. She said that she got a call one day saying, they want to translate your book into English. What do you think? And she couldn't believe that they had chosen her book. So she's very excited.
Oh, great. And have you had contact with her?
I actually last weekend went to Morioka, which is where she lives. It's in Iwate Prefecture, where this book is based, where she lives. And I went last weekend and was able to hand deliver the books to her. She picked me up at Morioka Station. We had lunch, then coffee, then tea, and then she had an event at a bookstore that night. That was why I was going to go in the first place. And she heard that I was coming, and so she said, I will pick you up. So we maybe talked for 5, 6 hours and then went to her book event together. So I know just how much it means to her to be translated into English. But because it's not the easiest read in terms of there's a plot and the likable characters and resolution and connection, there isn't any of that. So I think it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I do hope that it gets a good reception because I think that if you read it, possibly the more I read it as I translated, the more I appreciated the characters, the more they grew on me, and I started to kind of really feel for them.
What a fabulous life you have, Yuki.
Thank you. Wow,
Wow.
thanks. Okay.
Because Yuki has such a fabulous life and has so much more to tell us, I've decided that this is where we're going to end the mystery guest chat. And then she and I are going to keep chatting, and that full video will be released later. So for now, I'm going to say, Yuki, what's the word? I'm in a kerfuffle here from all the stimulating stuff you told me. Thank you for getting me into a tizzy. I hope you'll come back. I know you're coming back because we're going to continue, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Sean. This is just so much fun. Love talking to you.
Yeah, I could talk to Yuki for hours, and I'm really looking forward to having her back. I'm going to be ordering both of those books coming out in April, and as I said there, she had so much to say, and it was all so fascinating that I was not going to cut her off or get her to be briefer, not at all. So the full length chat with her book recommendations will come at a later date. All right. Oh my God. So I was pretty busy on BookTube this week. I got 2 videos out. I think that's the first time in quite a while. And one of them was a zooming in chat with Elizabeth of Bokens and Books about rereading. You can check that out. And also Chris of the Book Hookers and I doing our pseudo buddy read discussion of Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. And there's 2 parts to it. It's all explained in the video. I think I did explain actually a little bit about the Simon Savage on-stage interview with Sarah Waters that nobody can see unless you registered to attend it. That video was up and only available to you as a registered attendant for about a month later, but nobody else will ever see it. But we talked about what we got out of it as the second half of that video, so check it out in the fullness of time. It's very entertaining. Chris always is. All right. So I have finished 4 books, which is amazing. And I have started 1. And I'm going to be starting 1. Is that right? I think that's right. I'll amend it as I go along if I need to. And I've had a couple of not exactly duds, but disappointments. And then the 2 that were anything but disappointing to tell you about. We'll start with the disappointments. Sadly, this After Nora, it doesn't show up on the screen. I don't know why. So I'll put the GIF up. It didn't pan out. Part 1 was a 5-star read, and part 2 was very disappointing. So part 1 was about, it was autofiction or whatever, family historical autofiction. The first half was about the author's obscure painter grandmother. I don't think anybody knows about her now, but and her imagining her life, and it was to die for. Especially if you're into art. I would still recommend buying the book for part 1. It was glorious. And then the second half, and I don't know what was in her head, why she went this direction. It was about the author's father, who had a tepid, not even actual affair with a scientist who was very famous in her field from Portugal. And they didn't actually ever act on their desires, and it was all factual, and the author wondering what might have happened, and really deeply uninteresting. So, that's why I gave it 3 stars. Penelope Curtis is a esteemed art historian. This is her first work of fiction. If she writes another one, I would be inclined to try it because of how divine part 1 is. So I still recommend, if you can get it at your library or something, find it online for cheap, whatever, read the first half, and if you're at all like me, just skip the second half. Joe Smith and I finished this week our buddy read of this Chinese novel, Graft, by Li Peifu, translated by James Trapp. I don't know what language, because they never say. Oh, it might be in the introduction, which I didn't read, because I didn't end up enjoying this. I gave it 4 stars, begrudgingly, because it was so well done, and because it held my interest, but it's not a Shawn book at all. People, if you like mysteries and novels of corruption, and how corruption can corrupt the soul, this is a masterpiece, and I appreciated many things about it, but I don't like those kind of books. And this was a misogynist piece of shit, but I also am not blaming the author. I think he's probably just recording how misogynistic modern China is. But I couldn't stand the way the women were portrayed, and that made me so angry that I wanted to give it 3 or 2 stars just to punish it for the shitty portrayals of women. All the women were evil, or any that weren't evil, they died young, so they didn't have time to become evil bitches. And that just made me so angry. But beautifully written, had a lot about agriculture, and it chronicled really the change from whenever the Great Leap Forward, or is that what it was called, capitalism coming to China, and I certainly loathe communism because it's completely evil. There are no exceptions. The way capitalism screwed everybody up, all the people getting rich and corrupt, was not a pleasant thing either. So I think we should all go back to agrarian societies, and the way the world's going, I think that might be where we're headed once everything explodes. But this is a guy's novel, and I'm not a guy. Rónán Hession recommended it passionately to me, and he's much more macho than I am. And I think Joe is a little bit more macho than I am. It doesn't take much to be so. All right, let's get to the good stuff. Last night, I finished reading Mary Jean, the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. Boy, I don't like the way that's looking on the screen, but I don't know what I can do about that. Anyway, and this one was quite different and lovely. 5-star read. I haven't even had time to update my Goodreads about these last 2, but yeah, just really great. This one was more serious. There is a storyline, there is a backstory where Emma's, I think they were engaged, but certainly her one true love had died on the battlefield a few years before in Afghanistan. I don't know what the hell the British were doing in Afghanistan in the 1880s, but they were doing something. And there's stuff about that in this volume. And we get more of Emma. Emma is hilarious and impudent and brash and wonderful, but there's this undertow of grief that really came into focus in this book, and I just loved it. And then also a sense of growing friendship in a way that probably is like historical fantasy. It probably wasn't possible for a 20-year-old woman to have guy friends that would be getting as emotionally intimate in 1880, but I would love to stand corrected on that. But it is just really great. So, and we'll get to volume 5 in due course. And really the heart of this Friday Reads, in terms of what I've read, the book that has touched me more deeply than any book I've read this year. And I've started it, I think, almost exactly a year ago. It was a very slow read, which is the sign of a really excellent book, because I didn't want to rush it. I wasn't able to rush it. But it was just this character-driven, slow novel, even though it's set only over about a week. Making Up the Gods by Marion Agnew. Marion was my mystery guest several months back, and I had started the book even before I had her on my channel, and I have just finished it late last night. And I literally... Oh, everything's crashing to the ground. I was all verklempt at the end. I'm not going to keep this a secret because this is what I do with my mystery guests 9 times out of 10, is that I have them back for a full-length chat once I've read the book. So it will be an interview with Marion. I'm going to be recording it next week, and it'll probably take a few months before you see it. But what do I want to tell you about it now? I guess if you like deeply character-driven novels with pathos and humor, the protagonist, Simone, is a retired widow, and she lives in northern Ontario. Her husband's been dead a couple years, and she had a really screwed-up childhood with an alcoholic mother. And both of those characters, the whole thing for what your response is going to be is, can you deal with the fact that they are... You will decide for yourself, and you have to read the whole novel to come to a conclusion, but are they voices in Simone's head, or are they ghosts wandering around? But from, I think, page 1... she's talking to them, so you think, oh, she's not alone, but she is. Or in terms of human beings who are still alive, she is most of the time. But her husband, very benign presence in her life. And her mother, I kept envisioning, what's her name, Haldora or something? The mother on Bewitched, Samantha's mother. She seemed like that to me. and it wasn't just funny. Our protagonist, Simone, is deeply wounded by being raised or neglected by such a mother. And there has been a horrific car accident in which several people were killed about 6 or 8 or 9 months before. And I should have taken the time to look it up. Can I find it quickly? Maybe it's on the back. 9. A 9-year-old boy. Good. I'm so terrible with ages. He seemed about 9. That was going to be my guess. But a 9-year-old boy named Chen, which sounds like an Asian name, but it's not, here. He'd lost his dad and his half-brother in that accident. And his mother is going away somewhere for a little holiday and in fact to spread some ashes of the husband. And she asks Simone, even though she doesn't know her very well, to take care of Chen for that week or whatever it is. It's not much more than a week. And Simone is really quite a prickly, deeply unsentimental character. And she doesn't really want to look after a kid. She's never had a kid herself. Her husband had a son from his first marriage. And she doesn't really like kids, and she doesn't really like people, being around too many people for too long. But her conscience overrides all of those misgivings, and she does. And there's more to the story than that. There is a man that comes to town and we know from his very first appearance in the novel that he is an imposter, posing as a long-lost cousin of hers that she had never known. And he has been hired by somebody to do this as a way to trick Simone to sell her property. And so all of that proceeds. So that sounds rather plotty, but really, for me, I didn't care so much about that plot. It didn't bother me that it was there. And in fact, it did involve a lot of really deep, wonderful character work. But to me, the heart of the novel was this relationship between Simone and Chen. And we get Chen's diary entries all through it too. And it works because Simone is just really quite abrasive and cranky. And when those kind of characters soften in a way that's not sentimental, and there's zero sentimentality in this novel, I am outraged that this was not on major Canadian literary prize lists, because it is far better than anything that was. I will be singing this novel's praises for the rest of my time here on BookTube before you all kick me out. Loved it so much. All right, I've started the one that I told you about last week, reading it to Mum. A Wreath for the Enemy by Pamela Frankau. And this is a 40-something, 1954 novel. It's quite autobiographical, I've since learned. And it's about she actually reminds me quite a bit of Emma M. Lyon in the other series. She is brash and impudent. She's younger. She's about maybe 14. And she's living with her dad and her stepmom on the French Riviera. Her dad and stepmother, they have a hotel. And the dad is really eccentric. He doesn't like British people. And he often will just close his hotel for days at a time because it doesn't really want to deal with people. And our young protagonist, Penelope, God, there's a lot of crossovers in names and themes today. A profusion of Penelopes, who's standing in for the author. Apparently, it's quite autobiographical. She doesn't have any normal friends. The hotel staff and the guests are all bohemian novelists and painters and duchesses. And there's no kids around, and there's kids holidaying next door that she is gazing down the street at longingly, and they do strike up a friendship and plot ensues. One of the most eccentric characters is the Duchessa. She calls her the Duchessa. She's Italian. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it the Italian way correctly, but she is a larger-than-life character, and she's always saying, "Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful." Mum thinks I've chosen the perfect voice for her. I'm reading this to Mum on Facebook Messenger, and yeah, it's starting out. It's a little bit heartwarming and a lot funny, and really enjoying how it's starting out. And as early as tonight, now that I've finished the volume 4 of the Lion books, I am now going to be reading to Mary Jean. And this is timely because I've got a few days left for the Irish Readathon month. This Irish novel that I've been champing at the bit to read. This was another mystery guest. Gráinne by Gráinne Murphy. And my mom loved the mystery guest chat with Gráinne, which I'll link that in the show notes, so much that she borrowed my copy immediately and read it and loved it. And I've told Mary Jean a little bit about it, and she's very into listening to it too. So that's what I'm going to start. So that is going to be awesome. It has been a week of bountiful bookishness. I hope it has been for you too. Thanks for watching.